Hello, everybody, and welcome to the screencast on situational leadership. Like all screencasts I do, I want to save time, so let's just get right into it. Let me go over what I'll be covering today. I'll briefly go over what situational leadership is, and then moving on to stages of development. Each time someone starts a new task or sets a new goal, they go through very distinct stages of development, and we'll kind of talk about that and how that leads into the leadership roles we can take to help them go from the first stage to the final stage, essentially going from beginner to expert. So, what is situational leadership? Is basically a model for developing individuals. It's just the task that we set over time, the ways that we can help them, achieve a very high level of performance or competence on any kind of goal or task. Which means, in our context, one leadership style won't work in every situation. I think the easiest example is a scale one teacher fresh off the CELTA is in a different situation than a scale five teacher who is been with ILA a few years. They're in a different situation entirely, which means we have to tailor our leadership styles, our leadership behavior to the person's own level of development. I think the clearest example is we have two Scale 1 teachers who have started teaching jump starts. One teacher is, very just has a lot of knowledge about kids beforehand and is doing very, very well. But then the other person is, has never taught kids before, has no experience with children before, and is struggling a lot more. So, they're Scale 1 teachers, but each person is at a different level of development. So we got to tailor our own leadership style, if you will. Okay, so let's talk about stages of development, and I want to talk about it through a little story of how did John learn to ride a bike, and I'm referring to Jonathan Bird in this story. For those of you who don't know, Jonathan is an avid cyclist. He spends his weekends zipping around Ho Chi Minh City at blazing speeds. Um, he's an expert. So, but I'm willing to bet he did not start that way. He had to go from complete beginner to the expert he is now. So let's kind of talk about what stages he went through. First stage obviously is that he had to get a bike. Maybe he bought a bike, or it was given to him as a gift, or he stole it. It doesn't matter, but he had an idea to become a really good cyclist, so he had to buy a bicycle to start off with. So he's really excited to start his journey, start his path. But then a few months down the line, he's learning, but he's having a lot of issues here. He's a lot of setbacks. He's crashing a lot. He hasn't quite got the hang of cycling yet, so he's kind of having a lot of accidents and making a lot of mistakes. However, he carries on. He's motivated to become a really good cyclist, and he gets to a fair amount of knowledge and ability to ride a push bike. He's still very safe. He's wearing a helmet here, but yeah, he's definitely doing a lot better than the previous stage, and he's a lot more confident, and he's wanting to keep on going, and then he'll reach this level of expertise here. He's riding without any hands. He's doing wheelies in the street, and yeah, he can do anything on the bike. He and the bike are one. So that's kind of John's story of how he learned to ride a bike, going from complete beginner to the expert he is now. So at each stage, John had varying levels of varying factors of development. The two main ones are his commitment and his competence for learning to ride a bike. Commitment is just your motivation to stick with the task and keep on going when things get tough, and just kind of break through any setbacks. And the competence, of course, is just his natural skill level and his natural maybe balance and coordination and on a bike. How this relates to the actual the stages of development is that we can define each stage by these two factors, with one stage being a self-reliant achiever, called a self-reliant achiever. is defined by a person as very high competence and is high commitment level. So they have a lot of skills, a lot of knowledge, and which kind of feeds into their commitment to stick with that task or goal. Another stage is marked by low competence and high commitment. So not a lot of skills, not a lot of knowledge. However, they're very excited by this new task or this new goal. Another stage marked by low to some competence and low commitment. This is the disillusioned learner. They maybe are going through some setbacks and they're kind of frustrated by some of the kind of negative feedback, possibly. But yeah, they're still learning. And another stage is called the capable but cautious performer. Moderate level of competence and kind of variable, up and down commitment levels at this point. So, if we think back to John's story, how could we match the stages of development here to John learning to ride a bike? Like I said, each stage is defined by these factors of development, these varying levels of commitment and competence. How can we match these stages here to John learning to ride his push bike? So just take a few seconds if you can. You can pause it here and match, and then we'll go through the answers. Okay, so I think clearly the first stage is he was an enthusiastic beginner at this point. Very low competence, not a lot of skill level. However, he's very excited to learn how to ride a bike, so he's very, very motivated. But at the second stage, he is gaining some knowledge and skills, but he's going through a lot of setbacks. He's crashing a lot. He's getting a lot of negative feedback that way. So that kind of makes him frustrated, and he's not as committed as he was before. He's learning that it's not as easy as he once thought. But if he pushes through, he can get to the capable but cautious performer. So he's gained some knowledge, and he's getting more and more confident at this point as well, which helps him go to the self-reliant achiever. Very, very high competence at this point, and a high commitment level. Which, again, the high competence feeds into his commitment because he's an expert, so he wants to stay an expert. So very quickly, can you just briefly think, how do you think John felt at each stage? This is how you define the stages of development, but what were his feelings? How did he feel at each stage? He may have felt any or all of these things as he was learning to ride his cycle. And I just want to go through and just highlight some of the key kind of attitudes or behaviors at each stage. Now, this isn't an exhaustive list, but just for example, in this first stage, the enthusiastic beginner, I think the main thing here is that they don't know what they don't know, so they do the wrong thing. Again, very, very motivated, very eager, but they lack knowledge and skill. Moving on to the second stage, I think the main thing to see here is that person is frustrated and they may be ready to quit. So again, think back to John falling, crashing on his bike a lot. He's quite frustrated, doesn't want to get hurt anymore, doesn't want this feedback, and he may just want to give up at that point. Third stage is now they're gaining some skills and knowledge. However, they may be bored with this goal, depending on how long it took them from stage 2 to stage 3. It may be a long time, so they're kind of the romance is kind of worn off, and they're not really interested in doing it anymore. To the fourth stage, the self-reliant achiever. I think it's fairly positive on this side of the spectrum. However, one thing to be aware of is when we see people that are proactive and they're very competent and they're an expert, they may be asked to do too much, and their tendency is not to say no. So we have to be kind of careful when we see these people in our TSC. We see our Scale 5 teachers that want to give workshops and do observations if they're ready, that we don't give them too much, because that can have a negative maybe feedback or a negative effect on their performance. But I think it's also worth pointing out at this point that these stages here and these feelings, can happen kind of at any point in a person's career. So this stage of development, and then and these factors as well, affect the scale 1 teacher who is just learning to teach young learners. It can affect the scale 5 teacher who has just started to give workshops to colleagues. It can affect the senior teacher who has just been hired as senior teacher, and now they're in a more management kind of position. So it's important to see that this doesn't only affect beginner teachers or scale 1 teachers. These stages of development come into play at any point someone starts a new or has a new goal or starts a new task that they set themselves or that we set them. So it all comes into play anytime a new skill has to be learned. So just kind of bear that in mind. Um, so a quick task is to kind of think back to those attitudes or behaviors. Think of a teacher or colleague if you manage senior teachers or ACs that are working on a current goal, or they have a task at hand. Think about their work plan and what stage are they currently on with that goal or task. It could be the senior teacher that has just started observation training. Based on their behaviors or attitudes that you can tell, where are they in that stage of development? Are they a beginner? Are they a cautious performer? Are they a disillusioned learner? So where do you think they fall? Okay, so hopefully you paused it and you did that task, but I want to move on to what can we do to help our staff develop? Now, staff means teachers, ACs, senior teachers, AAMs, it doesn't matter. So since we all are in a leadership role, varying levels of leadership role, what can we do to help our staff go through these stages and become experts? Well, there's kind of two styles. And leadership role, I just want to say, is like kind of a pattern of behavior. And this one directive leadership role is a very hands-on approach. It's we show or tell someone uh, what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. So we sit down with them and go stage by stage, step by step, in teaching them how to do something. And just kind of a few examples here. We're doing peer observations. We're doing co-planning. We closely monitor them. We do pop-ins. We get feedback from students. We get feedback from TA, and then we pass that feedback on to them, and then tell them how to do something differently. So again, very hands-on, just very, very kind of detailed instruction to them. To the other side of the spectrum, being very supportive, the hands-off approach essentially is we trust the person. We know that they have some skill and knowledge behind them, so we understand that they can probably self-reflect and that they can self-evaluate their own teaching or their own progress. So we're more willing to work together to come up with an action plan, and we collaborate with them versus directly telling them what to do. Okay, so with those two leadership roles just discussed, what is the most appropriate leadership style or role we should take based on the stage of development for the individual? And I'll just do one as an example. I think the person in stage 1, being the enthusiastic beginner, needs a directive leadership role, and the person needs to be told what to do and how to do it almost at every point of their development at this juncture. So we're very hands-on at this point and just telling them kind of everything about this new skill or goal. For example, teaching jump starts. Again, we sit down with them, we co-plan, and we go step by step, stage by stage. So hit pause here and go through the other 3 stages and see if you can match the leadership style to the stage of development. Okay, hopefully this is all done. Let's go through the answers. Stage 2, again, the disillusioned learner still needs a directive approach. They're making a lot of mistakes, so we have to be there to show them how to avoid those mistakes or how to correct them and do it more effectively in the future. Stage 3, I think, is a mixture of directive and supportive. They're gaining more knowledge, they're gaining more skills, so we can be supportive in that sense, with what they do know. However, they will come up, against roadblocks in the future. They won't know everything, so we got to be there to help them kind of break through that and show them how to do something better or more effectively. Then, of course, the final stage, they are an expert for all purposes, and I think we can be a lot more supportive, and we can kind of work with them versus instructing them point by point. I think a very clear example is the Scale 5 teacher who has a Delta. We would be much more supportive in helping them, develop, their EA teaching versus a person that has just started teaching EA, which they would need a more directive approach. Sit down, co-planning, go to these workshops, peer observations, all that stuff. Okay, so practice. So from now into the meeting, I want you guys to do a little practice. Just think of a teacher or staff member. Again, it can be an AC or an AAM. Again, this is just in your own head, kind of a thought experiment. But can you diagnose their developmental stage at this point? So they should be kind of working on some kind of current goal or a task. I guess I'll just use the example of the new teacher who's just started teaching jump starts. I'll diagnose them stage 1 because they've never taught jump starts before and they're really keen and enthusiastic to start teaching them. Uh, I'll select the leadership style. So for this person, I would, of course, take a more directive leadership style approach. I would have to sit down with them and co-plan their first couple lessons. I would set up some peer observations for them, and I would do feedback on those peer observations, talking about what the teacher did and how they can use it in their own classrooms. And then with the same teacher, I would determine an appropriate goal. So my goal is then to get them from stage 1, from the beginner, to get to stage 2, the kind of more disillusioned learner. So that really is just the goal is to get them to a certain to stage 2, which might be the goal is just to get a low standard or standard on their next observation in a month's time. So that could be the appropriate goal there. And then in the time between that initial meeting and then maybe the observation, a month or 2 down the line, I would decide on how often to meet with them. So could be I want to meet with them every once a week or once every 2 weeks to have a co-planning session or a checkup on how they're doing. And I'd want to on how I want to do that. I want to do face-to-face meetings. I could maybe do emails or I could just something like that, but I want to do face-to-face. I think it's the most appropriate. So yeah, so as I said, can you, for yourself and from the now until the meeting, just kind of pick a staff member and kind of go through these stages here and just get a little practice in diagnosing their stage. What kind of leadership style do they need at that point, and what's the next goal? Now, determining the goal is just based on the stage they're at. If they're at stage 1 or stage 2 or stage 3 or stage 4, well, really, if they're at stage 3, what's the next goal to get them from stage 3 to stage 4? And if they're at stage 2, what's the goal or task to get them from stage 2 to stage 3? What specifically are you going to do to get them to the next stage? And then just the last bit, how will you track that progress? All right, so at the meeting, we'll kind of summarize the information we just went over here with stages of development and just kind of a brief review. I won't go over your practice. That's kind of mainly for you to kind of, again, just try it out and see what your current staff are doing and how you can actually use this information. But we will be doing some role plays during the meeting, so get more practice. And I just want to leave you some final thoughts here about leadership from Mr. Dwight D. Eisenhower. I think words of wisdom for everybody. All right, guys. We'll see you next week. Have a good one. Cheers.